It's worth noting there's a rebound adjuster on the bottom of this fork. Quite often in use these will fall off. I tend to take them off and just stow it away in your backpack, and then you've always got it handy when you need to adjust your forks. As you can see on this bike, they've given us rather a lot of gear cable, so you want to trim that down so that it fits nicely with the frame. So I'll just trim the end off the cable, moving the outer, keep the cable cap to one side, line your cable up where you want it to go, and then trim it off to the correct length. Just hold the cable like this and check that your shifter's operating smoothly. Put the cable end stop back on. And thread it through the rear mech. You can then re-secure the gear cable at the rear mech, cut it to length, and fit a cable tidy. That'll just stop the cable from fraying and end up looking like a Christmas tree. So spin your way through the gears, check they're working properly. Any bolts you see on the bike, just nip them all up, check they're tight, especially with the front and rear mechs. The brakes, the rear brake's rubbing slightly. So again, same with the front brake. Just loosen off your two clamp bolts. Pull the brake lever to centre it. Then retighten them. Check your rear wheels firmly in place. Also, another good thing to check is your chainring bolts. They seem to have a nasty habit of coming loose quite often. And your crank bolts as well. When I'm checking the nuts and bolts on the bike, a good system to use is to start at the front of the bike and work your way slowly backwards. Just going over every single bolt, making sure everything's nipped up and tight and as it should be. You don't want to leave anything loose and find out at a later date, do you? So, you need to pump your tyres up. I've got the luxury of a compressor here. Pop them up to 35 psi to begin with. Good starting point for your tyre pressures is 35 in the rear and about 30 in the front. I tend to run the front tyre a little bit softer, just because you get more grip with a softer tyre, and also it means when the bike does start to lose grip, the back wheel is always going to release before the front wheel, so much easier to control that when it goes. Another reason for pumping the rear tyre up a little bit harder is that it rolls much faster if it's a higher pressure. That's something that you could also consider when you are setting up your bike. Tyre pressures for the road. Even on a bike like this, if you pump the tyres up as hard as you can, 60 to 80 psi, the tyre will handle that no problem. If you get it up nice and hard, the bike will go so much quicker on the road. If you left it at those pressures for off-road, you'd be falling off a lot. The tyres would squirm and slip all over the place. So recommended tyre pressures for this one's 35 to 65 psi. So obviously 65 for the road and 35 for off-road. Last but by no means least, you're going to fit your pedals on there. Put a little bit of grease in the pedal threads. Just eases them on and stops them seizing on there as well. Okay, so your pedals are left and right specific. This one has a little R here. Quite often the stamp will be on the end of the pedal. So you should be able to screw these on quite easily by hand. If you can't, you're doing something severely wrong and you should take it out and start again. But they should screw in by hand quite easily. And then all you need to do is nip them up with the pedal spanner. Again with pedals, just nip them up. You don't have to hang on them like an ape, because if you do, you'll never get them off again. So just double check again over the whole bike. Have a good look round, taking off any annoying little pieces of sticker, bits and bobs that shouldn't be on there for when you want to ride it. I'm going to make some adjustments to the brake levers and controls here and move them inboard slightly. Okay, the bike will come set up with the brake lever right at the extremity, which is good if you use two fingers for braking, But with these brakes, they're very powerful, so I tend to only use one finger. So what I do is push the brake lever towards the middle of the bar a bit more, so that when your hand's on the grip, you're comfortably braking just on the end of the lever with one finger. Again, lever position and shifter position is down to personal preference. As a general rule of thumb, when you're sat on the bike, the brake lever should follow the line of your forearm and point forwards, so you can get it to you're in a nice natural position. You're not having to bend your wrists to reach the brakes. They're nice and straight, nice and level with your forearms. Next thing to check on this, as it's a full suspension bike, is the pressures in the fork and in the rear shock. So pressures on this fork, for an average rider, 75 kilos, probably looking at about 125 psi. Not all bikes come with a shock pump specific to the front and rear suspension. If you need to get one, you can always get one quite easily from your local bike shop for about 10 to 15 pounds. You've got a positive chamber up here. That's your positive air, obviously. That holds the bike up in its travel. On this bike you've also got a negative air chamber, which you should balance the two equally. What the negative chamber does is allows the fork to operate smoothly, because it balances the two sides of the air system. If you reduce the pressure in this one, the fork will become very sticky and not feel as smooth and plush. If you increase the pressure too much in this one, the fork will sink in its travel, so it'll come right down. It will feel really nice and smooth and soft, but you will lose suspension travel. Same pump to do the rear shock as well. Usually the rear shocks are pre-pressurized. This one, as you can see, is already running 150 psi. I'm just going to stick another 10 psi in there because I know that for my weight 160 psi is the ideal. If you have any trouble setting up the pressures on your front or your rear shocks, if you just visit the websites of the manufacturers of the product, generally a 75 kilo rider on this bike, fork pressure would be 125 psi and rear shock pressure 160 psi. Right. Set your seat post. General rule of thumb for me is have your saddle just below hip level. Make it easy enough to jump onto, just to spin it around the car park. So now is when you want to set your rebound, front and rear on the bicycle. As you can see at the moment, it's returning rather fiercely. If I was to jump on that bike right now and ride down a hill, it would knock me over the front of the bike because there's no rebound set up on the rear shock. So you've got a little red adjuster here. That's your rebound adjuster just there. Turn it all the way to the positive, which is in clockwise direction, to give you the most rebound the shock will give. And then press down the back. As you can see now, it returns very slowly, which is too slow for the trail. To get a happy medium, I normally run these just 3 clicks out. So wind it all the way in clockwise and then back it out 3 clicks. And that'll give you a nice rebound setting. Same on the fork. Wind it all the way fully in. Give it a quick prod. You'll see it's returning very slowly. Back it out a full turn. Always have a quick ride around the car park, somewhere safe, somewhere that you know, before you take your bike off-road. Working on your bike at a conservative pace, you should look to get the job done in about an hour. Your bike's ready to roll.